Alright, this is the time of year when it's too cold outside to work in the garage. So the Civic is sitting out in the garage and has the J series bolted into it. But now is the time to build the ECU. As you probably know, this car is getting a Speeduino like the Insight did. Um, it's going to be a very similar setup. Uh, I can give you a quick overview of it so you can see what I've got. Okay, so here is the Speeduino I put together. So it's got an Arduino board on the bottom here, hence the name Speeduino. And I covered where to buy these parts in a previous video, so go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. So this is a V0.4.3C, and this board is meant to be integrated into like factory wiring more than it doesn't have individual screw terminals like the 0.3 version has. Speeduino is kind of far enough along that there's all sorts of different versions now. This is the same one I used on the Insight, so I know where everything is. I know what's going on. So this one's the easy one for me to do. I do have a version D, so this is a 3C. I do have a 3D that will probably be used on my next project. Let's see, pertinent information here. It has a spot for a onboard map sensor. I'm not going to use that. And as a consequence, there are a handful of capacitors and resistor and stuff that won't be used. So that part's just blank. I'm going to use the OEM Honda map sensor. It came with the J series, and I've had good luck getting that to work on a K series in the past. I've got a ULN 2003, which is basically just an output chip. So that's basically an interface between some of the outputs, like for instance, radiator fan relay, fuel pump relay. Flex fuel comes in through here but doesn't go through the chip. Clutch switch is in here too. So what I did is some guys will put a connector, an ID40 connector on here and plug it in. That costs money. So since this is meant to be a relatively permanent installation, and I don't see a big benefit to being able to unplug it right there personally. So what I did is soldered wires directly to the board in the right locations there, and this has all been tested. And then I have what is this, a 35, let's verify that. This is a 35 pin amp connector. These are a good connector. That's the same connector that like a micro squirt would use. What I did is I just soldered the wires directly to the pin headers. You can see this has like offsets, so it's meant to be mounted on a circuit board, and the pins soldered directly to the circuit board. I didn't want to build a circuit board to do that, so I just went directly to the pins, and then I used white heat shrink with labels on them for the majority of the things. The ones with the two wires in there are the injectors, and the coil outputs are, actually I do have the coil outputs. The coil outputs are doubled up and the injector outputs are doubled up. So what else is worth showing you here? Oh, here we go. Because Speeduino uses, so there's some spare outputs that you can use to drive different things. The variable valve timing output can be used for like a duty cycle variable, like IVTech continuously variable cam timing output. It can also be used for like on-off VTech, like you get an old B series or a J series. But the problem with that is the way the original wiring harness is set up, the one side of the solenoid that activates the VTEC is grounded, and then the original ECU supplies 12 volts. Well, these are all these outputs are set up to just ground the output. So if you have ground on one side and you ground the other side, clearly nothing's going to happen. So what I did is I took where I think this is where the stepper driver chip is supposed to go. I think that's correct. Yeah. What is that? Something was supposed to go here, and what I did is I just took a circuit board, a piece of circuit board, and cut it up. And this is just a little relay that has 5 volts on one side, so the coil is 5 volts, and then it can switch 12 volts to the VTEC relay. So the VVT output is being used to switch VTEC, but it's switching 12 volts using this relay. It's just switching 12 volt power out there. I did build this with 4 channels of ignition and 4 channels of fuel injector outputs. I'm only going to use 3 of each, and I'm only going to use the crank sensor, the original Honda crank sensor, to make that happen. So also what I did is as you saw already, I'm sure, this is a 3D printed, there we go, this is a 3D printed enclosure that I found on Thingiverse. Turned out pretty good. I forgot to compensate for the 1% shrinkage, so I had to do some enlarging of the groove in there. So I'll put this together quick and show you what it looks like all assembled. And this is what the ECU looks like when it's all assembled. Alrighty, and here are the wiring diagrams I put together to do the Speeduino build. So what I did is I got the 07 Accord factory wiring diagram, and then all of the things in red are the things that I decided I needed to use. So the red is the wire colors, and then there's a handful of stuff that I won't be using. So those wires are in the harness and they come to the original ECU plug, but they're not going to be connected for Speeduino, so they'll just be sitting there. And then, oops, sorry about that camera work. Then when I had all that, I went through and put together this table. Can you see it? Let's try it like this. There we go, that's better. I put together this table. So I've got on the left the Speeduino pin, which is actually the pin on the ID40 connector, I believe. And then the ECU pin is the pin on this connector here. And then the sensor actuator is just the label of what it is. Chassis pin, if it's getting power, it shows where the power is coming from. And then wire color, and then the original ECU connector pin is the far right column there. Had a couple other things I put on there, like the C101 connector, how I'm pairing the coils, firing order, original ECU, pin location and tags, and then the swap harness is basically the connection to the green connector, which is C131, I believe. And there's a handful of things that need to be connected for, like the reverse lights and the starter circuit on the automatic car, to make that all work. If someone's interested in having me go through that in some more detail, I'm happy to do that. Just leave a comment. There's a YouTube channel called Soulless Soul, guy that builds J series Del Sols and Civics, and he's got a good micro squirt. He goes through in quite a bit of detail how to make the micro squirt work, and the interface stuff is kind of all the same as the Speeduino. So if you go over and watch that video, he probably does a better job than I would do. But I'm always happy to make videos of things that people find interesting.